So it's the end of January. My diet has been plant-based for this month, or I've made much more of an effort to be plant-based this month. But what have I learned? First of all, why am I doing this? Why have I made a conscious effort to eat less meat and fish? Well, for me, it's about environmental issues and animal welfare. But I'm a health coach. So I'm interested in what effect has it had on my health and what are the lessons that you can learn from that. And then specifically for me, what impact has it had on my gut health? And again, those of you with gut issues, what can you learn from that? Now, I have inflammatory bowel disease and IBS. So if you're in that picture, you could take something away from this. But I'll also talk about health more generally. Now, before I begin, I just want to clarify, I'm not a vegan. So I came into this not trying to do veganuary, not even try to eat a vegetarian diet as such, but just to take the vast majority of the calories, of the macronutrients, of the micronutrients that I was consuming for the month from plant sources rather than from animal sources. So plant-based to me means the majority of the food that I eat is from plants, minority from animals. In practice, this means, say I eat 20 meals a week, 15 out of those 20 meals contain no meat, fish, or animal products like dairy and eggs. So in terms of my general health, what did I learn? Admittedly, it's a short period of time. And there's one data point, me. So we can't draw grand epidemiological, societal lessons from this, but I will say that I haven't seen a discernible improvement in my general health. I had COVID at the beginning of the month. That's had a negative impact on my energy levels for sure. And I have had less energy, whether that's because I've gone plant-based or not, we're not to know, but I have had less energy. What's ironic there is that my sleep has improved. So less energy, but improved sleep. But again, the shift to being plant-based is not in a vacuum. I've also been meditating regularly in January in a way that I didn't towards the end of last year. So that may well have improved my sleep. What I do know for sure is that my diet has been lower in protein and higher in carbohydrates, plant-based, than it was when I was eating more meat and fish. I'm also eating more processed food. And that's because I'm trying meat alternatives that by their very nature, when you're eating some sort of non-meat steak, sausage, burger, mince, all of these things, they're obviously processed. You turn the packet over, you look at the back of the packet. Some products are better than others. I'm not going to name check them here, but we're looking at multiple ingredients versus a kind of whole food animal product. So more processed food. And then with more processed food comes an increased volume of preservatives. So things like sulfites. Now that's not great for my gut. That's not great for anybody's gut. So we'll come on to that. And generally speaking, I've been more hungry. Now, in terms of my digestive health, what have I learned? Being plant-based and gluten-free and grain-free is really tough. Being plant-based without eating pulses, so things like beans, peas, lentils, is really tough. Trying to eat plant-based without whole grains and without pulses means the main sources of protein and fiber in a plant-based diet are taken away, which means you're then relying on the meat alternatives to supply your protein and fiber, which means you're increasing your processed food consumption and you're increasing your consumption of preservatives that are going to aggravate your gut. So you either go for whole grains, including, gluten and other things that are difficult for you to digest. You include pulses, which again are difficult for you to digest, are going to aggravate your gut because of the fermentable starches within them, or you eat the meat alternative products. Because without them, without supplementing additional protein and fiber through, a processed supplement, you're not getting that protein and fiber that you need. So where I've been plant-based and had more whole grains, more pulses, of course, I've had increased like bloating and flatulence. Day to day, what lessons have I learned? You need more time to prep a meal. If you don't want to use a meat alternative and you want to make something without whole grains and pulses, or even with them, you're trying to sex up vegetables, which I absolutely love, but you've got to try to pack more flavor in there. It's necessitating some more preparation to make things interesting. It's maybe slowing down cooking times. So therefore the cooking time's increased. But it has given me a greater appreciation of the meat and fish I eat when I do consume it. So those 5 out of 20 meals a week that do contain meat or fish, I now enjoy so much more because of the rarity. That's not to say I don't love the plant-based, kind of vegetable-based meals. I do, and I'm increasingly finding interesting ways to make those things as desirable in my diet, but it's a learning curve. So in summary, it's balancing your general health, your personal digestive issues, and environmental concerns is a real challenge. Now that's fine. Like, this is a change to the way I eat, it's a change to the way you eat, and any change necessitates a period of adaptation. Going plant-based is no different. I'm going to continue now as we go from January into February, and from February through the rest of the year, I'm going to continue to eat mainly plant food. So I'm going to continue to be plant-based. I'm going to try to stick to this kind of 70, 75, 80% of my meals not containing meat or fish. I'm not contemplating veganism or even vegetarianism. I love meat, fish, eggs, and cheese. And the trade-off I'm making here is that I get to still eat the things I love, but in smaller quantities. And eating smaller quantities, eating less of these foods, means that I appreciate them even more. And I'm more mindful of the quality and the provenance. Not to mention, because if I've got the same amount of money to spend on animal protein, but I'm buying a lot less of it, then what I can spend per kilo or per pound of meat or fish has gone up. So therefore, I can buy higher quality. And also, I can take more time to go to places where I can guarantee the provenance, where I can guarantee welfare standards, where I can guarantee food miles, and therefore have less of an impact on the environment and on the animals that I'm eating themselves. Having inflammatory bowel disease and IBS, I feel best when I avoid preservatives, when I avoid gluten, when I avoid most grains, whether they contain gluten or not, when I avoid pulses and other high FODMAP foods. FODMAPs, for those of you that don't know, are fermentable short chain starches. Basically, the bacteria in your gut feeds on them, ferments, creates gas, gives you that feeling of kind of bloating, discomfort, flatulence, etc. The problem with a plant-based diet is that most of your protein and fiber comes from whole grains, pulses, nuts and seeds, or your meat alternatives. So therefore, by removing whole food animal sources of protein from my diet, but trying not to eat more grains and pulses that are going to aggravate my gut, I was a lot more hungry between meals because I didn't have that protein and fiber that gave me a nice, steady release of energy to keeping my blood sugar on a nice kind of slowly climbing trajectory, rather than that spike and crash that you get when the food that you eat is turned really quickly into sugar in your blood and pulled from your blood by insulin. So removing those whole food animal sources of protein from my diet, but then trying to add in those grains and pulses and those meat alternatives, meant that I was more bloated and I had that digestive discomfort because I was exposed to preservatives like sulfites, but also those fermentable starches, gluten, etc. So all of that being said, what's my advice? My advice is become a master at making things like seitan and tofu taste great. Because as meat alternatives go, you're going to get fewer additives and preservatives to the very best seitan and tofu products than you are when you're looking at something that's purely a lab construction rather than just compressed soybeans. That said, we're obviously in that kind of pulses territory with that stuff. Generally, find vegetarian and vegan recipes that you know you're going to cook before you go shopping. You know, if you're used to eating meat and fish, then, and you just walk around those same aisles at the supermarket and you know you always grab some salmon, you always grab some chicken, you always grab some beef or some lamb, whatever it might be, it's not going to be that straightforward this time. And so that you avoid just grabbing the meat alternative of the meat, so you go and grab some plant-based burgers or steaks or sausages or bacon or whatever it might be, like think about what you're going to go and cook and go and shop for that. Otherwise, you just end up cooking exactly what you would have done with meat or fish, but with a meat alternative. And I don't think you're really embracing a plant-based lifestyle if we're just swapping a steak for a plant-based steak. You know, learn to make vegetables more sexy, basically. But then you've got to allocate more time for meal prep and cooking, especially at first while you're getting used to this transition. Over time, obviously, the habits become ingrained, it becomes second nature, it takes less conscious thought. But at first, it is more effortful. When you do eat meat and fish, if you're going to continue to eat them like me, eat as much of the animal as possible. So buy the largest, least fashionable joints of red meat and cook them slow. Buy organ meat and eat it. Buy the whole chicken or the whole fish rather than wings and thighs and breast or fillet of fish. Pay the animal some respect. Eat the whole animal. Eat meat, fish and eggs that are organic, free range, outdoor reared, pasture raised, wild caught, etc. Buy the best quality you possibly can for your health, for the welfare of the animal, and for the environment. Be really mindful of the ingredients in those meat alternatives, as I've already said. In terms of your dairy, substitute animal milk for plant milks. That's a simple switch. And eat less cheese, but buy the good stuff. Preferably hard, aged cheese. It's going to have much less of an impact on your gut.